Thank you to people who are joining us right now. We are going to give it one more minute as people sign on before we start. Great, we're getting a good turnout. We're just going to wait a couple more seconds as people are signing on and watching that participant number keep going up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. We'll do some housekeeping things in the very beginning before I turn it over to our speakers today. Um, as you know, these are our monthly webinars to the public. We will be providing legal information. We cannot provide individual advice during these public webinars. If you have questions about things that are said, as long as it's not asking for advice, you can put that in the Q&A and we will get to that at the end of the presentation. If you do have questions and you need advice or you'd like to apply for services, we will show you how to apply for services at Community Legal Services at the end of this presentation. I'd also like to remind you that next month, again, last Thursday of the month, Thursday, January 29th, will be our next public webinar. That will be by our volunteer attorney and board member, Andrew Jacobs, and he will be talking about wage garnishment. So you can sign up for that the same way you signed up for this one. Just a little bit about Community Legal Services. We are a nonprofit law firm that we are dedicated to equal access to justice for all. We do various types of civil practice, as you see on this list, not just public benefits, what we're going to be discussing today. And you can apply for assistance in each of those areas that I'll show you at the end. Or if you work at an agency and you would like us to do one of these presentations about any area that we practice, we love going and doing Know Your Rights presentations, and we are happy to do that virtually or in person. We are in 5 counties, Maricopa, Yavapai, Mojave, La Paz, Yuma, and Farm Worker. But if you're joining us from one of the other counties in Arizona, don't worry. We have 2 sister organizations who do almost exactly what we do and provide and are also free law firms for individuals who are low income. To the southeast, there's Southern Arizona Legal Aid, and to the northeast, DNA People's Legal Services, and you can join those. You can find those online and apply for their services. Okay, I am now going to turn it over to Melissa Higgins, who is a lead attorney in our Health and Economic Stability Unit, and Jessica Fiddler, who is a lead paralegal in that same unit. Again, if you have questions while they are going through this, just put it in the Q&A, and we will get to it at the end of this presentation.
All right. Hello. Thanks so much, Pam, for the introduction. My name's Melissa, and as Pam said, I'm an attorney in our Health and Economic Stability Unit. So today's presentation will be on the nutrition assistance work requirements and what you need to know and how they may impact you. So just a little bit of primer. When I say nutrition assistance, that's what Arizona calls these benefits. They are also called SNAP or food stamps. But here we call it nutrition assistance, so I will just be referring to it as that. In Arizona, there are 2 layers of work requirements for the program. First, there is a general work requirement, and this applies to a pretty large swath of the population. It applies to individuals aged 16 through 59 years old. And on top of that, there's an additional requirement. We call it specific work requirements, and it applies to a class of people that are referred to as able-bodied adults without dependents. I will just use the term ABOD. It's a lot shorter to say, but that's a term of art within the program. And I'll go into specifics more about what it means to be an ABOD, but essentially, very generally, it's a person who's between the ages of 18 to 64 and who does not have a dependent in the household under the age of 14. Next slide. All right. So the general nutrition assistance work requirement, again, this applies to people between the ages of 16 to 59. So if you are not meeting a specific exemption, which I'll cover in the upcoming slides, DES will treat you as what is called a work registrant. I'll go into the exemptions in a bit, but first we need to understand the requirements of someone who is considered a work registrant. Next slide. So if you are within the ages, again, of 16 to 59, whenever you apply for nutrition assistance with DES or whenever you renew, you're required to register for work with DES, and this has to happen once every 12 months. And again, it happens at renewal or application. Another requirement as a registrant is that if you do not currently have a job, if you do receive a job offer that pays a certain minimum average weekly amount, you are required to accept that job. I'll go into, in the next slide or so, I'll go into what those minimum earning amounts are, but just generally important to know right now is you have to accept a job that pays a certain amount. If you are a work registrant and you already have a job, you are required to continue working that job without voluntarily quitting or voluntarily reducing your hours below 30 hours a week. And again, I'll go into a little more specifics about what it means to work and a little more explanation about the minimum hours requirement. Third, you are required to provide information about your employment status and availability to work to DES. And finally, you must not be disqualified from receiving unemployment insurance. Next slide. As promised, here's a little further explanation about employment and those minimum hours or earnings amount I had mentioned. So there are certain requirements on the level of work that you must do with either your current job or how you must accept a job offer as long as it pays a certain amount. So specifically, your level of employment must be on average 30 hours a week. If you work less than 30 hours a week, your earnings from that job have to pay a weekly average amount of 30 times the federal minimum wage. So the minimum wage has not been increased in quite some time, so it's $7.25 an hour. So doing the math, $7.25 times 30, your average weekly earnings must equal at least $217.50 if you are not working 30 hours a week. So our minimum wage in Arizona is more than double the federal minimum wage. So people, if you can kind of figure it out, but with what our minimum wage is, you can work less than 30 hours a week and comply with the job requirement or with the job offer requirement. There are various types of employment that qualify as work for nutrition assistance. It's not just your typical W-2 worker where you are hired by an employer. They also will include self-employment work, as long as you are doing self-employment work for 30 hours or more a week. If you are doing temporary work like migrant farm worker or seasonal farm worker, that qualifies, as well as work done for in-kind income. So what that means is you are doing work not in exchange for money, but instead for necessities such as food or shelter. So if you are performing in-kind work like that, you must be doing it at least 30 hours a week to comply with the general work requirement. Next slide. So that, if you meet an exemption, which this slide goes over, you are not considered a work registrant. So that means all those requirements on the previous slide I mentioned would not apply to you. So for example, you would not have to register for work, you would not have to maintain the 30 hours a week, etc. So it's a pretty robust list of exemptions from having to be a work registrant. I won't go through all of it, but I'll just mention, I think the biggies. So age, of course, if you are 15 and younger, or if you are 60 and older, you are not a work registrant. If you are in an alcohol or drug treatment program, inpatient or outpatient, that's another exemption. Another one is caring for a child under the age of 6. Important to note here that only one member of the nutrition assistance household can use that exemption if that is the case. If you're caring for, quote, an incapacitated person, no matter the age of that person, you would qualify for an exemption. Another big one on this list, I think, is if you're a student enrolled at least half-time in any sort of like school or training program. If you are receiving, applying, or appealing an unemployment insurance decision, you would qualify for an exemption. And finally, if you are found, quote, unfit for work, that's their term of art, due to disability or illness, you are not required to comply with their work requirements. So unfit for work, what that means is you have a physical or mental health condition that renders you unable to perform work. So this could include learning disabilities, mental illness, physical conditions. It can even include temporary conditions, such as if you are recovering from a surgery. So in order to be found unfit for work, it has to be either one like medically certified, so a medically qualified provider can attest that you are unable to work. It doesn't even so, if you don't have that, if you go in person to a DES office, and sometimes DES workers, like the physical or mental condition may be obvious to them, where they say, yeah, this person really can't work at this time. A DES caseworker can even verify that they believe you are unable to work. So it doesn't always have to come from a medically qualified source. Next slide. So those are the general nutrition assistance work requirements. And now the next layer are the specific work requirements, which apply again to the able-bodied adults without dependents, or ABODs. And then next slide, please. Before you can understand the specific work requirements, I think it's really helpful to know, well, what is an ABOD? It is a person between the ages of 18 and 64 who they do not have a disability, and they do not have a child in the household under the age of 14, and they are not pregnant, and they are not considered, quote, an Indian, urban Indian, or California Indian, and these are terms defined by law. A recent law change, I think if you've ever come across this term through maybe applying for yourself, you might have heard the term ABOD before. I think it's important to note that recently this year, they expanded the definition of who's an ABOD. It used to be people between the ages of 18 and 54, but that was recently changed 18 to 64. So if you fall within that age range, just important to note, if you're confused why all of a sudden you're hearing about ABOD, it's because they expanded that to include a higher number of people based on age. Next slide. If you are considered an ABOD, you are subject to a very restricted time limit. This means you can only receive 3 months of nutrition assistance benefits in a fixed 3-year period. Sounds pretty harsh. Luckily, there are certain exceptions where that time limit would not apply to you. And these exceptions are if you meet the general work requirement exemptions. So again, that would be if you are caring for a child 6 and under, if you are in a drug or alcohol treatment program, if you are unfit for work, etc. The ABOD time limit would not apply to you. The other 2 exceptions we haven't talked about yet are the ABOD work requirements and the good cause exemption from working, which I will go into in the next slides. Before I go into those exceptions, though, I wanted to provide a little more explanation on what the ABOD time limit means for people. So assuming that you are an ABOD and you do not meet a work requirement or an exemption to the work requirement, you are only able to receive benefits for 3 months in a fixed 3-year period. So here in Arizona, our 3-year time period right now is January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2027. It's the same for everyone in Arizona who applies for nutrition assistance. So by way of example, I have John and Jane here who are both ABODs, and we are assuming they do not meet an exemption or they are not working. So if John applies for nutrition assistance January 1st, 2025 and continues to not qualify for an exemption, he would only be able to receive benefits for 3 months. So his time limit would end March 2025. We have Jane, let's say she applies for nutrition assistance October 1st, 2027. Well, she would be eligible to receive 3 months in that time period, which would end December 31st, 2027. But because the 3-year time period is the same for both John and Jane, the clock will reset for them both on January 1st, 2028. Next slide. So what are the ABOD work requirements to know where the time limit would not apply to you? So first, one way to not have the time limit apply to you is that you are working at least 20 hours a week or an average of 80 hours a month. The second way you can bypass the time limit is if you are not working, you are participating in a work program for at least 20 hours a week, or again, 80 hours a month average. You could even do a combo of the two. Let's say you do have a job, but it's not averaging out to that minimum time limit. If you are spending your time also participating in the work program, they can combine those times to reach that 20-hour-a-week threshold. Next slide, please. So just a little more explanation on that work requirement, the 20 hours a week of work or 80 hours a month average. They have a pretty broad understanding of what they would consider as work. It, of course, includes paid work, self-employment work, but it also includes volunteer unpaid work. If you're volunteering at a local charity or agency or at a church, for example, that would count towards that 20-hour-a-week minimum. If you're working not for cash, but in exchange for food or shelter, called in-kind work, that would also apply to that time limit. Next slide. And then second, if you're not working, you must spend a minimum of 20 hours a week or 80 hours a month average participating in a specific type of work program. So the first two are actually directly from the state. The first one is called the SNAP CAN program. It's through DES. On the slide, if you want to learn more, is an email address. You can contact them directly or even look up their website to learn more about this program and how to register with them. The second one, again, it's a state program, and we have their website up there. The third program is a federal program, the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program. It's meant for workers who have lost their jobs or been displaced from their jobs due to foreign trade or foreign commerce. So we have a phone number there to contact that program directly. And finally, a work program that would comply with this are any employment training programs offered by Department of Labor, which is a federal program, or the Veterans Administration, or the VA. If let's say you're ABOD and you do have some work, but maybe through no fault of your own, you miss some hours. There are good cause exemptions for this, where even if your work hours or volunteer hours dip below that 20-hour-a-week requirement, that month would not count against your 3-month time limit. This is called good cause. So the circumstance must be temporary and unavoidable. And on the slide here, it's a non-exhaustive list. This doesn't define the entire universe of things that could be considered good cause. These are just by way of example. So common examples would be if you are sick and you weren't able to work. If someone else in your home that needs your care is sick, and you had to take care of them, that would be a good cause exemption. Unexpected emergency, it could be maybe you had to go to court for whatever reason. If your car broke down and public transit was unavailable to you. lack of childcare for a child between those ages, 6 to 11. And also unreasonable work demands. That could be your employer's not paying you or not paying your fair wage, or employer discrimination. Again, non-exhaustive list, and DES will find good cause on a case-by-case basis. Next slide. Some practical tips if you are considered ABOD. So every person who is found to fall within that class, that umbrella term, every time they apply for nutrition assistance, they are required to fill out the ABOD time limit form. This is what the form looks like. We have a screen cap of the first page on the screen just so you're somewhat familiar with it. It basically requires you to attest to DES, like how you're fulfilling those work requirements. So you can see here, are you working an average of 80 hours per month? Are you in an approved work program? And it goes over the exemptions you may qualify for. So you are required to review this form and submit it to DES with your application. The form on the end pages, it does give you the various methods of communication with DES, like how you can turn it into them. So you could do it online on their website. You can send it by mail, fax, or even deliver it in person to your local DES office. And all that information is contained directly on the form. Another practical tip for ABOD is important to know if you are working and you're, bypassing that time limit. If your hours fall below that 20-hour a week or 80 hours a month requirement, you must report that to DES. And your time to do so is the 10th day of the following calendar month. So for example, let's say you lost your job in December, you are required to report that to DES by January 10th. Next slide. And just to wrap it up, some helpful tips, and this is to not just ABODs or people even receiving nutrition assistance, but anytime you're dealing with government agencies, we always explain to our clients that it's how important it is to carefully read all notices that you receive. Also, if a notice is requiring you to affirmatively do something, like provide information to them, respond to a notice, please do so, because if you do not, that could negatively impact your receipt of the benefit. Also, follow all deadlines. And if you are required to provide information or documents to DES or any government agency, keep copies if you can of the documents you give them. For example, if you send it by mail, keep a copy for yourself. Maybe write on your copy the date that you mailed it. If you fax it, keep your fax receipt. If you are hand delivering documents to DES, make a copy of whatever you turned into them and try to get the DES caseworker to date stamp your copy as proof that you turned it in and the date that you turned it in. When you communicate with DES or a government worker about your benefits, if you can't keep a journal of the names, dates, times, and the summaries of the conversations, just to protect yourself and to know what is being asked of you and what you are being told by the agency. And finally, know that community legal services, as long as you qualify for our assistance, we're available to help. So if you have questions, if you need assistance, you're always welcome to contact us. Which is a nice segue, Pam, to how they can reach us.
Absolutely. And while I'm going over how to reach us, if you do have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A and we will go over that in a second. But if you want to apply for services, you can call us 9 to 2 or at our 602 number or our 800 number, or apply through AZ Law Help. We also are in person. Our rural offices have in-person times and are in Maricopa County. We are on Tuesdays at Peoria, Wednesdays at Native Health, and Fridays at Mesa Can. CLS will be closed the 24th, 25th, 31st, and the 1st of this month, though. Great, and let me see if we have any questions. I am not seeing any questions right now.
I know that was a speed run of maybe kind of complicated stuff. So I'm also happy if people wanted, I could put my email address in the chat if that's helpful.
Awesome. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be great. And it can always email CLS and we can get it to the right person. And this will be on our YouTube channel, so they can always watch it again too. Okay, we have no, I will give you a second to put your email in to the chat.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out a way I could
It's okay. Why don't I
give
tell
it.
everybody it's
Okay.
M as in Melissa Higgins, Higgins. So it's M Higgins at clsaz.org. Again, that's M Higgins at clsaz.org. Okay, thank you so much, Melissa. That was really helpful. I learned a lot today. And I really appreciate you sharing this information with us. And again, it will be on our YouTube channel in a couple of days.
Right.
All right, goodbye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a great day.